And this is another Living Library conversation. So, like all the other conversations that we've had so far, yep, thumbs up, Nini. If you are a member of the Karmic Margin Call Project Time Bank, you can redeem all of these hours as services provided. So, you're learning about the Living Library, you're learning about some of our members of our Exploring Integrity group, and it's all really just about deepening relationships. So, the last couple of interviews I've done with this Nini have been with members of our Exploring Integrity group. I've done one of these with Amy, one of these with Lori, and what's really coming up is these are really turning into kind of spiritual conversations and about our spiritual beliefs, our spiritual backgrounds. And what I'm hoping, as I'm also exploring the ministry, is to really be comfortable with whatever spirituality is a part of who we are, so that we don't have to be uncomfortable with our truth. And everybody has different experiences. And in this conversation, all I'm going to do is just reflect back what I'm hearing and what resonates. And I'm also going to ask some clarifying questions if I have any. So, first question I just have to ask is if you were a book, Nini, what would the title of your book be?
I'll use like what Elton John says. This song has no title, just words in a tune. You can't
Oh,
sum
wow.
me up if you tried.
Very cool. Very cool. So tell me about that. So that's I think that's great because it's one of those themes that come up where, we're undefined. We can't be put into boxes, I think. But yeah, tell me more about why you chose that title.
My life experiences, it's been very different. And I know pretty much everyone's gonna say, oh, I had this different experience, which I think is cool. We all have a unique experience. I mean, that says something. Everybody has a unique experience.
Hmm.
But for me in specific, like I know that there's a certain level of outside the box that's like outside the box, like outside the space-time continuum. Like,
Yep.
when I say my first time being here in space time as a human, as a female, it's like, wait, what? It's like, yeah, I
Mm,
do remember my intergalactic, and I'm not going to say past lives. That's what most people call them. I'm going to
mhm,
say parallel lives because
yep.
when you
Hmm.
step out of time, they're happening simultaneously.
Yep.
And most of us, when we enter here, we have the amnesia, so we don't remember. But I have always remembered, and I didn't always talk about it, and I wasn't always 100% clear on what it all meant until about 4 years ago.
Hmm.
So just because of all that, I guess, interdimensional, multidimensional knowledge, I don't even know how to put this into words, how to put this into a title, except for
Hmm.
just intuitively.
Yep.
I know what feels right, and I know what doesn't, so I go with that.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So, yeah, let me go ahead and go ask the next question, and that is, what is one of the themes that have come up for you in your life when considering your spirituality and considering the outside of the box, outside of the box, experience? What would be the first theme?
I'm not really sure how to. I'll listen intuitively because I'm not really sure when I think
Okay,
about it mentally.
that's great. That's
So
great.
it's a feeling of, just not feeling wanted, really
Mhm.
not feeling understood, really not feeling heard. And I know that sounds like very negative, and that's certainly not the spin I want to give.
Mhm.
But it's a feeling of, despite the fact that everything in the hologram, everything in the interface is telling you you're wrong or telling you there's something wrong with you or why can't you be more like us? But then you have a voice on the inside that's saying, because I'm not. And even though everything on the outside seems to indicate that you really should be following a certain path, the inside is saying, but that's not the path for you.
Right.
And that's when I noticed really it's always come up. It's been like sometimes it's pushed me to like very strong, like against very difficult walls where it's been like, listen, you're either going to listen to us or you're going to lose our support. And it's like I had to take
Mhm.
that leap into the uncomfortability and say, no, then fine, I will never ever sequester my intuition because apparently you people are going to let me down if I don't do what you say, but my intuition never has and it never will. So that's been kind of a theme, and I notice the more that I trust that and I get back to that, that divine oneness. Some people call it God, source,
Mhm.
consciousness. I'm going to just say God because that's what I call it. So when I always trusted in God, I knew that would never leave me. And I said, I will always be kind to others. It doesn't mean I won't always be perfect. And, not that I don't have unresolved stuff that gets in the way and I don't react at times. Of course, there's no spiritual teacher that is absolved of human experience. I know a lot of people will say, yeah, I've reached a spiritual height. I no longer have an ego. I no longer need physical pleasure. Food is stupid. Money is evil.
Yeah.
And any physical pleasure is gluttonous and horrible. That's not true at all. Like
Hmm.
anyone who's saying that they're not telling you the truth. It's just not real. And,
Hmm.
my intuition always said, you love good food, have good food. You're a freaking foodie. You want to sit there and you want to exercise till your heart's content. Wake up at 3 a.m. and do 6.5 hours exercise.
Hmm.
Who died and made them king? So
Right.
it's always been trust that inner knowing because it will never lie and it never
Hmm.
has.
Yeah. Yeah, so getting to it, I actually had an experience like that myself today, where I kind of stood up for, stood up for what I believed in, and it had to do with the business and the sales end of things. But I wanted to ask you, in your human life, in your, day-to-day life, do you feel comfortable telling a story about where this came out, where this came through, where you stood your ground for, even though everyone else was telling you what they thought was right and what was wrong, but you stood up for for your belief, for your intuition. Can you tell me a story that happened in your human life that kind of exemplifies that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
When I was in high school, I started, September 11th, 2001 happened right after I turned 16.
Wow.
And I was in 11th grade. And when that happened, I had flashes from, other also interdimensional experiences. And I started to, I guess you want to say, come out of the closet. And I started to share my truth that inanimate objects are alive. So it's like when I
Mhm.
saw the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center going down, I didn't just see buildings. I
Wow.
saw twins, like a brother and a sister, going down. And as they were, this was really sad to me, but like when the first tower got hit, the first World Trade Center tower, that was the brother. He kind of said, I'm tough. I can do this. And then when his sister got hit, she knew she was dead immediately. And she
Mm.
said goodbye. And the brother said, hey, come on, you can do this. And she said, no, I'm already losing it. I'm already transitioning and whatever. She fell down first. And then when she went, the brother said, without my twin, without my beloved sister, I've got nothing to live for. And he went down. And I'm seeing this like vision. And I've
Mm.
never been to New York before. I had no idea even what the Twin Towers were. I mean, I knew like Sears
Mhm.
Tower because I lived in Chicago and
Right.
John Hancock Building, and I've always loved tall buildings, but no idea about New York, except for,
Mhm.
okay, Empire State Building. Everybody knows that.
Mhm.
And I remember I started to talk about that the buildings are alive and that all inanimate objects are alive and that they talk to me. So I
Mm.
got sent in for psychiatric testing because I was pegged for having hallucinations. And I
Wow.
went into the psychiatrist, and I remember, she did like, the IQ test, and then she did like the Rorschach and the TAT. And I
Mhm.
remember the answers I gave, and there were a few that I said, it felt chaotic. I see chaos. And whatever. I said honestly what I saw, and I get called in, and it was a room full of like therapists and other professional psychologists. And then I was called because at that point I was old enough to, even though I wasn't 18 yet, I was still old enough to be privy to this meeting. And a
Mhm.
bunch of professionals were saying we're going to put you under antipsychotic medication, and you're depressed, and we have to put
Mm.
you under medication because you're having hallucinations, and your test results are showing abnormal chaotic tendencies and all kinds of stuff. And I was like, wait, what? I didn't get
Wow.
it, but I remember I stood, in front of a room full of professionals. I finally stood up. I'm in high school, and I said to the psychiatrist, like to the big kahuna, I said to her, I will never take medication. And I walked out of that office in front of a room full of like psychologists, and my mom was there. And my
Mhm.
mom happens to be a psychologist as well. At that point, she had
Oh,
her
wow.
master's, not her PhD yet. I remember
Mhm.
my mom, she was like, in her mind, she just wanted to do what was best for me. She didn't, she kind of felt intuitively I didn't need medication because she raised me.
Mhm.
But I remember she was in that room too, and she saw me stand up and walk out. And I remember she kind of asked me, are you sure? And I said, I will never take medication ever.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that was it. I walked out, I stood my ground. And then 2 years later, I got a copy of the notes of my scores, and I saw that they were skewed because I
Mhm.
remember what I had answered. And the psychiatrist, when I was reading the notes, you know, I saw they were very badly skewed. And when you take someone with a very high IQ, of course, you're going to say the genius is like the psychopath.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
she started saying, "Oh, she's answering chaos, and and I said, "What about all the ones that talked about peace and harmony and, you know, multidimensional intelligence and universal one?" That was all. She didn't say a word about that. She focused on the one or
Wow.
two slides where I said chaos, and that's what she skewed my entire test to be. So you take a very high IQ and you match it with
Mhm.
those results. Yeah. So I told my mom. I said, "Mom, she lied." And my mom actually believed me, which I was so grateful for
That's
because she was the
great.
family
Yeah.
psychiatrist. She was the family psychiatrist. My mom stopped seeing her. For any of my siblings, she stopped, she terminated completely.
Mhm.
So I was really grateful, really grateful. And, to this day, that was 22 years ago, and I've
Mhm.
never taken medication.
Very, very cool. Yeah, and this is actually a great conversation, Nini, because as you know, a lot of my work is really exploring the intersection between mental health and spirituality, and what are some of the misunderstandings, and how sometimes mental health can be very harmful and very hurtful to spiritual development. So yeah, let me ask you about that, about the medications, and my intention in asking about this is not to place a judgment about medications, good or bad or anything like that, but just tell me what your experience is, and why you declined medication, and what are your feelings about that?
Okay, that's an awesome question. I'm really happy that you're bringing it up. To anyone
Mhm.
who might watch this or who is watching this who is on medication, God bless you, because I'm not against Western medicine, and I'm not against psychiatric drugs at all. And for some people, being a healer, I have told some of my clients to go to their doctor because I would never give medical advice. I think you need to go to your doctor. I'm suspecting, in your case, medication might be helpful for you.
Mhm.
And, so I feel that it can be a godsend for some when used appropriately. Western medicine, when used for like an acute flare up that's really going woof, and then for long-term sustainability, obviously work with your doctor, work with a supportive healthcare team. And when you do that, the best way to know is like you can have a great doctor who's great at practicing his or her medicine. But if on a rapport level, on a frequency level, if you are not vibing with them, like if they have a bad attitude, or when they tell you something, your body's like contracting, that's body wisdom. That's letting you know that you're not resonating on a frequency level, because it's not just about putting a pill in your mouth and having the neurotransmitters, do their thing. It's about also when we have thoughts and we have emotions, those things send out vibrational frequencies, electro and magnetic, that the neurons in the brains are electrical energy. The neurons and the synapses, they're electric. You can see this on ECGs and EEGs of the brain. And the frequencies of the emotions are magnetic, which is why when someone is being a jerk, you kind of feel repelled, like, what? And when someone's being loving, you feel like, I just want to be close to you, because that's the contraction and the expansion, which comes with magnetism. So electromagnetic frequencies are being emitted with your thoughts and emotions. And when those things are not balanced, when they're out of balance, you might be inadvertently attracting things or repelling things that you may or may not want. So for long-term sustainability, in addition to the medicine to help balance you so that you can be functional on a prefrontal cortex level, this will help you for long-term sustainability, so that now you're taking the medication that will allow you to receive the spiritual growth and become more emotionally intelligent, so that in the right time, when you're with the right doctor who is giving you the medication with the right frequency for you, which will be different than the right frequency for me, you can now choose the best life path for yourself. So I'm not against medicine. I think it can be a godsend. And I think there's a reason we have it. The thing that I caution people is don't use it to numb away the pain, because people often use it to like put a band-aid over a symptom to avoid the actual work, which is, often you want to call it the shadow work, the emotional intelligence work, the work underneath the sponsoring thoughts and emotions that we are either reacting to by trying to go supernova, go kaboom, stay away, or by numbing it down and saying, oh, me? I don't have needs. I don't have an ego. I just give to everybody else and I never have a need. You know, I call it the universal butt kisser, or, the hyperactive, I'm going to kick your butt person. I'm going to kick your butt. Don't mind me. I like to act.
No, that's great. We're I'm glad that you're acting, because I'm my team who does the mental health work. We're doing actually a workshop next week, and we have an activity called Four Characters, where we act out the feeling of safety, desire, appreciation, and curiosity. So I like that you're acting these out, because what's coming up for me as you're saying that, and what I think has a lot to do with our human evolution, is that because we live in such a, a competitive culture where, the alpha personality seems to be more rewarded and aggrandized. My theory is that the safety and the desire are so hyper stimulated, that the emotional intelligence, is very underdeveloped. And the way to get there is to, access the curiosity, asking curious questions, not making judgments, so you can access the appreciation or the empathy. So that's why it's, in a lot of ways, especially with medicine, with the mental health industry, there's a lot of pressure on clinicians and practitioners to, to kind of shut down that intuitive, creative, spiritual, conversation that comes up. And I applaud you for standing up for you, and I'm glad that you stood up for yourself, and I'm glad that that wasn't forced on you, because that's sometimes what happens when somebody stands up to the system, that it gets forced on them. I'm so glad that your mom believed you. So I think that was, yay, mom. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
for
yay,
that.
mom. Mom,
Yeah.
if you ever see this video, yay, mom.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So no, there's some good stuff coming up here, Nini. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this conversation starts to generate with some of my peers, because at my interspiritual community, some of the board members are therapists, and we're very interested in deepening that conversation, and really, really kind of removing the systemic barriers that the medical industry has really placed on people and humanity. So yeah, you're a great role model for being able to stand in your power, and stand for what you intuitively know. So yeah, that was a great chapter. That was a great
Thanks.
chapter in your book. I would like to learn more now that we're recording this, and you had alluded to this in some of our exploring integrity conversations, but I really want to hear now your story about how you came into this life. Um, yeah, let me just ask you that question about you coming into this life as a star seed, and I'd love to hear that story again now that we're recording this.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to. It's there's a lot of pieces to it, so I'll do my best to keep it succinct. And basically, I came from a place. There was no space, there was no time, and we didn't speak in words. So what I'm giving over is obviously the best representation. You know, because when we interdimensionally shift, it's whatever is closest to the interface that we recognize. So throughout my human life, I would have glimpses of these memories, and they would frighten me. I remember being 2 years old, and some of it would come up, and I would be petrified. I didn't know, things just triggered it. And there was this one thing that I remembered very, very clearly. And this is the one word, the one physical word. There are a few words, but this is like the one real word that I remembered. There was this thing called the win. And now we're not talking about like, woohoo, I won, not that kind of win. This was like, the best way I can describe it is like, it's like a tangled hierarchy. It's the idea of, it's like a limit in calculus you approach, but you never reach. So on things like the golden ratio or the golden rectangle, it looks very, very beautiful. Like here on Earth, it looks very beautiful. But imagine entering into that vortex, like, kind of a singular, like you get past the event horizon of a black hole, and you're on this like stairway of infinity, and you keep going and going, and you can't, because you're past the event horizon, you can't go back, and you're forever falling in this bottomless pit. So the win was that it brought you in there, it took you past the event horizon, and basically you were sucked into oblivion because your, I want to, it's not really molecular structure because it's not quite what it was in that universe, but like your quote unquote quantum subatomic particles were suspended. So your essence could not continue because it suspended you. And I didn't know what it was when I was a child, but I knew, I mean, I didn't remember all those details, but I knew it was something that had chased me. and it was very evil. And I knew what it's like when it activated, like when machines activate, they make a sound. I knew what sound it made because sounds were there in this universe. And ever since I was a baby, I was afraid of this thing. Didn't know what the heck it was in my Earth life. And I remember 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago now, it was the summer of 2019, right before my birthday, a few days before my birthday, I was sitting in the kitchen and the memory was triggered, and my sister was right there. She was watching the YouTube video that triggered my memory, and I started to feel scared. And I finally said, you know what? I've been running my entire life. Show yourself to me. Now, I'm also a born clairvoyant, clairaudient with many of the clairs, and my experience as a clairvoyant is not like I passively go into trance and then I'm given visions from some spirit guides. It's never been that way with me. It's very active. It's very dynamic. I ask a question to God, not to any guides. I've never had a guide in my life. God answers me direct. And I've had God speak to me through me. And I also want to emphasize everybody in the world has this. I'm not special. I'm not this guru that God speaks to me and not to everybody else. I was just very aware of it. But my experience wasn't through a guide. It was through God directly. And all of a sudden I see this vision and I'm in this other universe and I'm channeling this out loud. I'm not in any trance. I'm not asleep. I'm totally in like beta brainwaves here. I'm not like in any trance state at all. And I'm channeling this story of where they have this technology that is so advanced, more advanced than any technology you'd ever seen here. It puts like our stuff to shame, as if to say. And a lot of people in star systems talk about the peace. This was a very evil system. The planet that I had come from was very peaceful, but I was a curious, I guess, masculine little boy, and I went for a bike ride. I'll say a starship ride, but we didn't have vehicles either in that sense. But when I came back, my planet wasn't there. I got, the evil, quote, shadow government, a word I'd never heard of in my human life, but I heard in this vision, destroyed my planet. And they were after me in specific because I was one of the survivors, and they wanted to know, how did we have such a balanced, like, economical flow? Like, everyone was very wealthy. It was a very collaborative, communicative way of doing, economy. And the flow was very balanced, whereas the shadow government, they wanted all the power for themselves, and they were denying the existence of God. It's what you can say as, like, I just saw this in a podcast today. There's there's the people from Lucifer, and Lucifer means fallen light. It doesn't mean Satan. They're like the very spiritual, you want to say positive toxicity, spiritual bypassing, where they say only spirituality, human existence is horrible. And then you have the other one, I forget what it's called. I just watched this thing today. I apologize. But it represents the materialists who are like, listen, God is dead, entropy is king, we're all going to die anyways, and this physical space-time continuum is king, and it's fundamental, and that's it. So it's like very strong materialism, like Darwinism, versus like ultra woo-woo spirituality, and it's like a big tension between the two polarities. So this reality that I came from was very much of the materialistic, and our planet was pretty much the last one that was balanced. And I basically said, I had this like very, I guess, stand up for yourself kind of audacious nature. And I said, I'm not telling you anything, because I knew I was a teacher of divinity. And I was not going to tell the shadow government anything. So I was wanted for being insubordinate. And someone that I thought was my friend actually had turned me in because they were looking for me. And when they found me, they were going to use the win to send me into that. It was the worst punishment, that catacomb of you're suspended forever. And as I'm running away from this thing, because I quote unquote hijacked one of their starships, it wasn't the starship, but that version, I'm running away as fast as I can. And I can't outrun this thing. And I see this vision of like a wormhole, or it wasn't really a wormhole, it was a white hole, and it showed me Earth, and it said, you have one chance of survival. You will be suspended into super space, or you can go to Earth. And then I said, okay, take me to Earth. But then there was an integrity lack, because my initial incarnation, I was arguing with God, being a keeper of the truth, like one of the administering angels as the keeper of the truth, saying, are you out of your mind to create a space-time continuum with evil? And God said, well, I'm casting you down there. You think you're so smart? You're going to go down there. We need your energy of truth down there for it to survive. And I said, you're not making me go down there. So I went through many other subtle body incarnations, but now it was like, okay, you're going down there. And I'm like, well, it's either that or be suspended. I don't want myself to be suspended. So I chose to go into the space-time continuum, and I'm racing through. And as I'm going through, I see my mom, and she's in the birthing room getting ready to give birth. And my mom, her soul sees me and says to God, I want this child. And God says, you are not equipped. This is not for you. And mom was like, to do. I want this child. And God's like, equipped, you're not equipped. And my mom's like with the evil eyes. So God says, okay, I never interfere with anyone's freedom of choice, but I gave you a few warnings. Don't say I didn't warn you. So I was basically yanked out of the out of that running flow. And my mom said the story was when she was in labor with me, she was in labor for over 24 hours and they needed forceps to get me out. And when the doctors had said to her, okay, now don't push, she didn't hear the word don't. So she pushed. And the story was that when I came out, the words were, quote, I flew out like a rocket. The doctor had to slide back on his wheelchair, the chair with the wheels on it, to catch me so I wouldn't fall on the floor. Welcome to planet Earth. But it explains all kinds of, born as a clairvoyant. I was the 5-year-old kid who took home a math textbook and did the entire thing front to back because I wanted to know. Or it's like, in school, they had the way they got me to behave was they would threaten to take away math or science. They would say, hey, if you don't behave, you're not doing your math. You're not going to get science privileges. Okay, I'll behave.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. There's two things that come up for me as I'm listening to this again, Nini. Also about the Luciferian consciousness.
Thank you,
That,
Luciferian. That was the word.
yeah, the Luciferian consciousness, where there's I've heard many stories like that, where what the Luciferian consciousness represents. We on earth, especially from the Christian context, seem to superimpose satanic type of behavior or rituals, but that's a completely separate, different thing. The Luciferian consciousness is, about the light bringer. And where I think a lot of people get confused is that in the original story, the reason why Lucifer was cast down was because and Lucifer expresses its energy as female usually, and the reason why it was cast down was because she would not serve humanity. God said, if you want to believe in a patriarchal type of God that we've set up here on earth, God said to Lucifer, serve mankind. Lucifer said, I cannot do that. So God said, go to hell. And that's what, that's how, there's this creation of, there's this pride, there's this brilliance, there's this light. And and that goes into the second part that came up for me as you were recounting your story, is that there's two relationships to God. There's the horizontal and there's the vertical. So the vertical is really about the hierarchy, that you need a spirit guide, and like you said, you don't really work with guides, or you need a priest or a minister or someone to intervene, because according to doctrine or to indoctrination, we're born into sin, and we need an intermediate to connect to God. That's the vertical. That's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But then there's also the horizontal, which is the tree of life. Which is what you're connecting to. That there is no intermediate necessary. There is no need for an intermediary. We are really connected, and it's just about connecting to that source energy. And when we see that in each other, when we're aware of oneness, the law of divine oneness, we realize that we're not above or beneath anybody. We're just a reflection of each other. So that's what came up for me, just listening to your story. And the deeper conversations I would like to see happen as well, about where this Luciferian consciousness comes from, and the difference between the tree of life and the tree of knowledge, the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
It's interesting as you say that also, because things are coming up for me as well.
Mhm.
I'll be very transparent. I actually practice Orthodox Judaism,
Mhm.
and that's what I do. And it's people have asked, you're so spiritual, you're so open to all these different things. How could you practice a dogma or a dictum? And I say, because the original idea of a religion is just a mode of connection, and there's no wrong way.
Mhm.
everyone's going to describe it a little bit differently. Like there's this, again, omnipresence of God that flows through everything. And in Judaism, we call that Shekhinah. In the Hebrew, it's called Shekhinah. Maybe you
Mhm.
say Shekinah, but it's, I'm not sure how the English, but it's Shekhinah, where this flow, and it's, again, it's a feminine flow that's, you know, it's what maybe ideal Hermeticism calls consciousness, capital C consciousness. It's just this permeating flow that flows through us. It's liquid, it's beautiful, it's loving. And then obviously there's the realm of the absolute, which is, you know, the infinite oneness. And just to emphasize that, you know, infinity is not this big gigantic number. You know, people who think about the idea of hierarchies of infinity, like Aleph naught, you say, you know,
Mhm.
they're infinite counting numbers, infinite natural numbers, but then there's an even bigger infinite amount of irrational numbers, because between each natural number, there's infinite amounts of irrational numbers. But, you know, the issue with that line of thought, I'm not saying it's not brilliant, the mathematicians weren't brilliant, but the problem is you're treating infinity like a finite, countable, quantifiable entity, and it's not.
Yeah.
So, you know, once you've hit infinity, that's it. There's no hierarchy anymore. That doesn't exist. And when you're talking about the tree of life, there's an idea of as within, so without, you know, the microcosm and the macrocosm, that
Yep.
we as human beings, as physical individuals, are all fractals and subdivisions of God as the one. And
Mhm.
what's cool about a fractal is that while it does appear physically in space and time to be separate from another fractal, each fractal is holographic in nature, in that it contains the entire the macrocosm, the entire full picture within its microcosm. So the
Mhm.
entire tree of life that is God
Mhm.
also is inside of each and every one of us as a microcosm, as
Yep.
a subdivision, as a fractal. We just have our own unique perspective. So it's this fine balance between love, which wants to connect back to the one, and
Mhm.
be collaborative as a teamwork, like the symbiosis of a whole being greater than the sum of its parts. But at the
Mhm.
same time, we strive for freedom. And freedom is to stand in our individuality, which represents, in my understanding, more of the tree of life of good and evil. And
Mhm.
it's a balance of both, that, you know, the sense of self, because that's what the human beings, that's what I understand. The ego is not evil. It's not
Mhm.
this evil demonic thing that wants us to be doomed.
Mhm.
The sense of self is just us on the mental emotional plane, learning that, you know, just because we think in our minds we know something, you know, it doesn't really necessarily have to make sense in the way that we think it should. And
Yep.
that our sense of self should not be inflated so that we think we are better than the one. It's
Yep.
about learning to have that part of ourselves, not obliterating it, that gets
Mhm.
rid of the responsibility, but learning to have that part of ourselves be also in subservience to the one, that we're not separate from, but we're a part of. So it's that balance of love as the infinite one,
Mhm.
yet the individual sense of self as freedom. It's like, you know, I'm Nini Castle and I have a very strong opinion about things, but at the same time,
Mhm.
I also respect that if somebody else with another strong opinion, like, you know, I was reading someone's post, he had asked me to review his post about physics. And this guy was saying space time is absolute and there is nothing else. And, you know, of course, my personal belief is like, well, that's not true. But what I really loved what this guy did was he took all the theories, like of Einstein's law, theories of relativity and different laws of motion based on Newtonian physics. He explained all of the theories. He wrote down the formulas, and then he explained where he felt the error of thinking was. And he explained, you know, based on different accelerations and decelerations, is where the flow of time is, you know, felt faster and slower, you know, as opposed to it being, you know, but again, it's not that it's really relative. It's just, you know, if we're moving at a different speed, okay, Einstein says it's relative. He's saying, no, it's still absolute. It's just an illusion of perspective. And I felt, even though I disagreed, and I even said to him, I said, you have an extremely brilliant way of delineating this, and I really appreciate it. But I said, you know, you're, you know, basically suggesting that space-time and physical particle reality is fundamental. And I said, you know, I suggest that, you know, there are other more subtle realities that are fundamental to space-time. So if what you're saying, you know, happens to be true for space-time, then I agree with you. But since I believe in a more subtle body and different types of multidimensional existences, I think your theory can be expanded. And I said it that way to respect his process. And, you know, I wasn't sure how is he going to respond, but he was he was very pleased. He said, no, I appreciate that you said that to me. So it's really, that's where I feel the collaboration is so important, because, you know, we walk around feeling, well, my way is the right way and the right way is the right way. And I know that I'm Jewish and blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's very nice. But what about my friend over there who's Christian and who believes in something different than me? You know, to that person, what they're experiencing is the right way to them. Who am I to sit there and say, well, my way is better than yours? Like you say, if you go according to the tree of life, there's no better. It doesn't exist. It's an illusion. It's an illusion. So
Yeah, and what that brings up as well too, I'd like to ask you, tell me about your journey with Judaism, from being born into that religion, into that culture. Can you tell me about your journey has been like with that?
Yeah, I've never had an issue with being Orthodox Jewish. I know that like sometimes I would see like the rabbis kind of getting their high horse. And I remember even being like an 8-year-old, they would bring sometimes like a rabbi into the school and everyone would be all like huff and puff, like, oh, this rabbi, like, oh my gosh, worship the rabbi horse. And I remember even as an 8-year-old, I was like, why? He's a human being. And I remember like sometimes what I didn't like was sometimes the people they brought in, they were hot shots. And I remember whatever being like also in grade school and being a clairvoyant. And when they brought in this great rabbi, I was like, he's not great. In fact, I know what he does here. And I was saying all the stuff that I was seeing clairvoyantly. And I remember the teacher's like, how could she say that? Oh my gosh. Like, cover up her mouth, like, get her out of the classroom. They were like tying my hands up. They're like, yeah, And I was just like, wait, what the heck? Like, wouldn't you want me to, like, don't you guys want to know this? But they were not very happy with me kind of blowing the cover. And I do remember also one time they had brought in a rabbi who really was very learned and humble. And, there was a whole room also filled with adults, and they're all trying to, they want to get his wisdom, they want to hear his advice, his blessings, whatever it is. And I remember I stood there like almost like a 7 or 8-year-old. And I remember this rabbi, like all the adults are surrounding him, like, oh, look at my picture, like whatever they wanted his attention for. And the rabbi finally says, he looked at me and he says, I want everyone to move over. And he called me forward. I want this. And he said, I want this young lady to please step forward. And they're like, what? And they all realized like there's this little girl standing there and like, and then they're all embarrassed. So the rabbi said to me, I want you to step forward. And I remember I came forward and he said, you all can take a lesson from this young lady. Everyone here is getting all worked up and she's very quiet and she's waiting so patiently. Or he just gave me a blessing that I should be successful. And it was very nice, like, how he kind of knelt down next to me. He gave me like a pat on the head and it was very sweet. And I remember I could feel this was a good person. But the truth is about Judaism, the rabbis aren't God. And people often think that, the rabbi blesses the plant, everything is kosher. The rabbi blesses the synagogue. Okay, the rabbi can give you a dispensation to give you a pass. No, it doesn't work that way. For me, it's just the rules. And I say the word rule very, very loosely because I look at it this way. I don't like rules. I don't like dictum. But like, if you guys were to get a job, the job is going to have a code of ethics. And they're going to say, listen, if you're working for us, there's a certain dress code. There's a certain way you speak. There's a certain way you talk to customers. You have to come at certain hours and fulfill certain requirements based on your roles. So quote unquote, I'm working for the Orthodox Jew job, as if to say. And being the case, I have, I don't have to. I get to. It's an opportunity. I'm given the opportunity to follow the integrity of the Torah and the 613, not commandments, it's a Yuchi word, but opportunities, as said by Neil Donald Walsh. The 613 opportunities that are, all summed up in the 10 opportunities, otherwise known as the 10 commandments, where I have the opportunity to follow as an Orthodox Jew. And somebody who is, quote unquote, not working for the Orthodox Jewish, job, as if to say, they're going to follow their levels of integrity. So I don't look at it as a dictum. I look at it as a privilege. And believe me, if I have a spade to call, like, there are times where I'm studying the Bible and I read some of the interpretations, and then they'll say things like, oh, and like and like the God came down and he punished, and it's like he was so angry and he told Moses, punish these people, and all this punishing talk. And I remember I sat there and said, this cannot be true. I said, I can't believe what's being projected. I said, it can't be true. God doesn't punish. And I remember I was a bad little girl. I decided, like, I was at the gym and it was bothering me so much that even at the gym, I'm like, no, I have to look this up. So I looked up you can get everything on Google. So I looked up the different verses, those chapters on my phone, and I started reading the words in the text. And nowhere in those words did it insinuate punishment. It insinuated other things. It insinuated, okay, what does it mean that the Jews went down? And it says, okay, it doesn't mean that they were punished. It just means that they had, their levels of consciousness when they were being enslaved had lowered to such a low level that, when God was coming to bring them out, it's like it almost insinuates God had to prove itself and say, well, everyone should know that I am God, that I am God. And I'm like, okay, God, what do you have to prove? And God, I asked God as I was reading through the text, and God says, I don't have to prove anything. It's just you guys at your level of consciousness needed proof. That's where you were. As you rise in your level of consciousness, you will no longer need proof. But at this point, when God says, I'm going to take you out and show that I am God, it's because you needed to prove it, not because I needed to prove myself. You guys needed the proof. So I said, why don't the interpretations say that? So, I always ask a lot of questions. I adhere to the levels of integrity. I'm not afraid to ask the forbidden questions. I'm not afraid to go and look it up. I'm not afraid to, if it doesn't make sense to me, go and check the research, go open up a text and say, aha, aha, aha. So that's kind of my take. It's been fun. There are things that I certainly struggle with, just like everybody else. I certainly have my struggles, and it's hard. I'm not going to deny that, on the physical level, it isn't difficult. That, like, sometimes I wish I could just do certain things, but I say, hey, think of it like a job. Sometimes I wish I could just go home at this time, but okay, the job description is I need to fulfill a certain amount of hours. So, okay, we're going to stay. And that's that.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you did that dive too to find out what the scripture actually said. I was listening to a speaker a couple of weeks ago, as part of my ministry training as well too, is that how the scriptures and what passages are being focused on are kind of like the genome. It's kind of like in the DNA, and the one that you focus on, the genome that you focus on, is kind of how the organism expresses itself. And I think I might have shared with you online. I'm not sure, but I was in a conversation with a Christian who was using passages from the Old Testament to justify violence against Jews. Saying that if someone is quote unquote wicked, send them to me, and they interpreted that as being fair game for violence, for killing, and it's like you said, God can really only meet you at the level of consciousness that you're at the moment. But I've been finding myself in conversations a lot lately where it's like, yeah, when the emotional intelligence is still at that level where, it's very tribalistic, it's very much, us against them, there's only so much you can do. But when you look back at the passage and kind of look at it through your own lens, through your own codex, it's interesting that people interpret it very differently. Like where some people see excuses for violence, some there's someone like you and me who read that, it's like there's really nothing in here that's really advocating for violence. And I think that's I think that's conversations we need to have more of, is like really looking at it and discussing the multiple different interpretations of what we're seeing and what the passages really are saying.
Yeah, and I think, it's our projections because, really they're multidimensional. It's like
Mhm,
everything, again, if you want to say it's the fractal,
mhm,
it's what we see on the holographic screen is what we're projecting. So, our eyes are projecting, and we're seeing, let's say we're more primitive and we're seeing more violence, we're going to see that everywhere. It's how we do one thing is how we do everything. And
mhm,
that's why, when Seth speaks, he talks about, and psychology talks about this too, that, if you have an angry impulse, a lot
mhm,
of times, even before it hits our conscious mind, we're so fast to push it down by reacting to it
mhm,
or by denying that we have it in the first place. And it's very important to, admit to ourselves, I'm feeling a little bit like I just want to kick this person's butt right now.
mhm,
And, that's far healthier than to pretend we don't want it and say, well, may God bless you and blah, blah. And it's like, no, you don't have integrity with that. And I'll be very honest. Like
yeah,
we have neighbors and they can be very loud. They can scream. There's just a lot of, they have some problems, very, very distressing problems, unfortunately. And, sometimes I feel like, especially when the children, they have two kids, they have a little girl, not a little, but they're older, they're teenagers now. And the boy on the front is the one that appears to have the bigger problems. But the boy, he's sweet, he's a gem. Unfortunately, he struggles tremendously. The little sister that everyone says is the normal kid, she's the one that's evil. And when she starts screaming, I sometimes just say things like, I want to kill her. And then we
mhm,
all say it sarcastically, but I actually gave myself the permission, like, no, I don't mean it sarcastically. I want this girl dead. And then I
mhm,
sat there and said, Nini, what are you saying? And I'm like, you know
mhm,
what? There's a part of me that does. And I'm
Yeah.
not, and I'm saying it publicly. I'm not going to lie. I think we all feel this way. Deep down, if anything were to happen to her, I would be mortified. But like that part of me really wanted to see her gone. And I think, we feel that if we have such an impulse, that means that we're sinful, and that means that we're
Hmm.
filthy. And, as a lot of people say, we're drenched in sin. And I will say sin is an illusion,
Hmm.
because if you really look at sin, the Hebrew word for sin is chet. And the
Hmm.
word chet has the same numerical value in Hebrew as chai. And chai means life.
Hmm.
Chai is life, it's 18. Chet is life, it's 18. And from sin, or from
Hmm.
error, I'm not going to sin, I will
Hmm.
say from error is where we learn, is where we grow.
Wow.
That gives us life. So the fact that we make errors, that we make mistakes, that is part of life. That's what gives us life. God is not upset that we make mistakes. It's when we
Hmm.
don't have the emotional intelligence and self responsibility to say, I did that. You're
Yeah.
right. I am so sorry. Now, how can I learn? As opposed to, it's like, if you believe in the story of Adam and Eve, the issue wasn't that they ate from the tree. God came down, and in the Hebrew, it's ayeka, which means where are you? And at the destruction of the Holy Temple, also, there's a scroll, and it's also called echa. It's the same spelling, ayeka, the same
Hmm.
exact spelling. So God is calling to us, where are you guys?
Hmm.
And when God says ayeka, do we go run? It wasn't me, it wasn't the one, it was the woman. The woman, oh no, it wasn't me, it was the snake. Snake, it wasn't me. Everyone's just shoving the blame. It's like, come on, guys. What if Adam and Eve were really one being at once? They were one being at once. God separated them because they wanted to experience the diametric opposites. So then they became unified, through being together physically. Okay, fine. But why are you blaming a part of yourself? You're blaming just the part of yourself that you don't recognize as yourself, instead of saying, you're right. Thank you, God. Where am I? You're reminding me that I disconnected. I ate from the tree of good and evil. I got lost. I wanted to be better than thou. I'm really sorry. But no, we went and shoved the blame. So were we banished from the garden? Absolutely not. It's just our level of consciousness could not even receive, because we kicked ourselves out. And why don't we have it back? Because we haven't evolved. God's not punishing us. God's not punishing Adam. We have not emerged yet. The tree, the seed has not emerged into a sprout, into a plant, into a tree that is ready to go into the garden yet. We're still growing, we're still saplings. And we have to be okay with that, because if we keep condemning ourselves, God's not condemning us, God's not punishing us, God's not judging us. We're doing it to ourselves because we have some sort of esoteric expectation. And I think that's really the fundamental issue. When God said ayeka, it's not, but that's what we did. So, okay, that's where our consciousness was. And now we need to learn. And that's what the emotional intelligence is all about. I remember learning that prophets only receive prophecy, when it said when their hearts are gladdened. But I think, what I understand it to me is not that you have to be happy, wappy, sappy all the time. Sometimes I receive clairvoyance even when I'm very, very sad. But if I'm getting in my own way because my sense of self is inflated or my emotions are so clogged up, I won't hear God. So I'll say, okay, let me calm down. I need to be emotionally honest so that my unresolved emotions do not trap the God channeling, like a blocked artery traps your blood from coming through. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I also want to cap that off with as well too is like with the anger and saying, how, you wish somebody was hurt or somebody was dead or whatnot. It's a lot more energy and a lot more trouble to cover up those feelings and judge yourself with those feelings, because when you judge yourself, like, on the map of consciousness scale, you went from anger and then you slipped back into shame, when you judge yourself and you feel ashamed of that. But when there's healthy ways to express that anger, where you're not expressing it on another person and hurting another person, but you find ways to channel that anger, then it can turn into pride, because you found a way to express that energy and not hurting yourself or others. So that's just what it came up for me as you were also speaking about some of those feelings that people just don't want to deal with, and the importance of having the spaces, the safe spaces, to be able to express those feelings in a healthy way. So I wanted to just mention that. But we are getting close to time here. That went by so fast. That
I
went by
have
so
this
fast.
thing of time, this time dilation,
Yeah.
Einsteinian time thing, where time literally becomes relative. Like even when people work out next to me, they'll say, "Oh my gosh, like I've been here for 60 minutes. I never can work out for 60 minutes. The most I've ever done is 25. And I say, I just take you for a space-time loop. Welcome aboard.
There you go. That's right. Yeah, there's that time dilation, or what I call Kairos time, which is living
Kairos
time.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kairos and Chronos. We like the
Yep.
Kairos time.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Spending time in Kairos time. But for the last couple minutes here, I'd like to go to the chapter about money and finances. So in our exploring integrity meetings, you had mentioned about about the financial end of things. I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about that. Where do you see yourself going this year, as far as the financial journey?
Okay, so one of the things being someone who, is very spiritual and at the same time kind of a BS buster, I'm gonna
Mhm,
say it out. I love money. Money
mhm,
rocks. I love good food. Food rocks.
mhm,
Let's just say it out. I love chocolate. Chocolate rocks. And here's the common denominator. All three of those things can be destructive when they're misused. People can, use food in very unhealthy ways. People can use chocolate in very unhealthy ways. And for all chocoholics, I'll explain. Please forgive me because I know that's probably sacrilegious to you. And people who love money can use also for very disadvantageous methods.
Yep.
There is the creative energy can be used positively, where it's used to build things up, or it can be destructively, but it's still the same creative energy. Just do you want
Mhm,
to use it for positive or negative? So I'll use chocolate because it's fun. I got a clairvoyant message as a teenager to start, quote, God said to me, you put so much garbage in your body, start taking care of yourself. Now, I've
mm,
always been an athlete. That was not the hard, to exercise was easy because I was doing it anyways. I could work out for hours and hours. That wasn't an issue. But eating healthy, I mean, like, I didn't like vegetables except for French fries and ketchup. And I'll tell you, even now, as someone who's very, very healthy, I still eat ketchup. It's awesome. And
mhm,
you can choose your vices. But besides for calories in, calories out, I knew the first nothing about nutrition, just absolutely nothing. And I said, God, talk to me. So I had to start with something. So I started with this balance of, well, if I'm going to be adding healthier foods to my diet, I mean, I have to be releasing other foods that don't serve me. And I didn't even know where these words were coming from because this was not in my circle. I never had this type of spirituality in my upbringing. It was stuff that I intuited from the inside.
mhm,
And I said, no matter what I eat, I have to put self-love into it. If there's no love, then it's pointless.
mhm,
And I just, on my own, I revamped my entire diet. And when it came to chocolate, because I had the biggest sweet tooth, everything, the way that I do chocolate now is that it's actually a superfood. And I buy different cocos. I get them from all over the world. I have my cousins from Israel. They'll send me the cocoa from Israel because I love it so much. The
yeah,
unsweetened cocoa. So there's no like, you're not talking about the ones with all the chemicals in it, but just like raw unsweetened cocoa. So I have Hershey's. I have the one from Israel. I have, It's Delish. I have Olive Nation. Just all over the place, just different brands. And I blend the different cocos. I'll mix them, let's say, in my yogurt. I make healthy shakes, topic for another time, where I make healthy milkshakes, just milk and ice. And for those of you who don't do dairy, you can always use almond milk or oat milk. I can do dairy, that isn't an issue.
mhm,
And I use stevia for sweetener. I use the pure vanilla extract, and you just put it in the blender with some ice, and you've got yourself a milkshake. It's really cool.
mm,
And no, so just being able to find that balance of how can you use chocolate in a healthy way. Money is the same.
mhm,
Money is the frequency of giving, receiving, and sharing. Collaboration.
yeah,
People will sit there and say, yes, but money is evil because the way that society is using it is for destruction. I said, okay, hold on a second.
mhm,
Money is just money. You said something important, the way that society is using it. That's not inherently or intrinsically money's fault. Again, remember we talked about the holographic projection.
yep,
If the society is projecting evil onto money, and unfortunately this is the shared reality amongst people, and we're
mhm,
kind of sharing the world, we have to
yep,
participate. But the
yep,
flow of money is not that way. And it's anything else like a yin and yang. So the idea of
mhm,
money is something that gets to be flowed from the sales point of view, where how can I help you solve your problems? And it's a little more, okay, I got to put myself out there, I got to make myself visible. But at the same time, it's, again, like I said about the doctor, it's a frequency. I
mhm,
can be the best, multidimensional clairvoyant healer in the world, but if I'm a jerk to you,
mhm,
why the heck would you want to work with me, even though I'm physically good at my craft? It doesn't matter
right,
how psychic I am. If I'm an idiot, why would you want to work with me? So there's
mhm,
that internal flow as well. And money on a frequency level, and I've had psychic conversations with money where it said, I'm like the lover that's being abused by someone. Like, it's like
mhm,
every night you have a one night stand with me. And if I don't perform good enough, you don't want me anymore. Until you don't
yep,
have enough of me, then you're calling me back. And then once you've had too much of me, then you tell me to leave. And it's like, money goes, I
Mhm.
hate it. It's horrible. I hate the way this is working.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what it said to me. And I said, well, I'll never use you that way. And money
Mm,
had said to me, the only reason that I don't flow to you as much as you'd like to see is because you have emotional work to do and you have
mm,
some anger to work through and you have some blocks to work through. But it said to me, as far as how you use money, you know, you use it fine physically, but it was saying it was my frequency. And this
mhm,
conversation was many years ago. So
mhm,
I've much worked on myself. And, you know, it's really about gratitude that really, if you want to raise your minimum standards, that's awesome. Like
mhm.
people sit there and say, well, if I raise my minimum standards, that means I don't appreciate what I have. And that's not true. You can love what you have and say, you know, I'm so grateful. I have a roof over my head. I have a fridge full of food. I have time freedom. I have whatever it is. I'd love to amp it up. Come on, God. It's my
Yep.
birthright to abundance here. Let me remember to receive that which is already mine.
Mhm.
You're infinite, which means I'm infinite. So my dream is to be fully expressed financially, abundantly, and to just love it up being the millionaire, billionaire version of myself and handling that sum of money with responsibility and integrity and demonstrating that this is what's possible. You know, a
Mhm.
lot of people could be millionaires, billionaires, and they're living in
Mhm.
total scarcity of what if they lose their money? What if they lose the
Yep.
house? What if they lose the job? What if they lose the company? You know,
Exactly.
what if it's just there and you don't have to worry? I mean, obviously
Mhm.
take responsibility and make sure that you're doing the thing, but like you don't have to worry about it. Just stay on track and you're
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. What comes up for me too about that, how we are perceiving society as using it as well too. To me, what comes up for me, and you're one of the very few people who understands my work, and thank you for that because you're hopefully you're a very rare person, and hopefully our numbers are growing because you do understand what I'm trying to do with the economical system and the money and all that. But I think it really comes down to tribalism and how we treat each other because we think of most of the people in their relationship with each other, and I think that this matches their relationship with money. The first stage of tribalism is that the world is irredeemable. People are awful, and I need to join a tribe. You know, to make sure I'm the one doing the punishing and not being punished. Stage two tribalism is, my life is irredeemable. Everybody's better than me, so I need to join a tribe, just for protection. Stage three is kind of like the scarcity minded narcissist who says I'm great, but everyone else is beneath me. Stage four is where you have a tribal you are affiliated with your tribe and you say we're great, therefore we deserve to manage, to rule, to do whatever. And that's where you come up with your idealisms, your racism, your ageism, all that. And then you have the stage five where we're all connected. We're not in competition with each other, we're in competition with what's possible. And that's where I think the more of us who are kind of seeing the entire ecosystem, how we work together as a whole, we're the ones who are going to be able to change that relationship to money so that the better we treat each other, the more it flows. Because like you said, with you had the conversation with money. For me, how that conversation looks is just that there's some pipes that just need loosening, and so that the flow can go through a little bit more. And I think that's what this work is about, is really just how do we treat each other better to open up the valve and let the energy flow a little bit better. So that's my version of the story.
Yeah, no, it's I think the big thing is, you know, all paths lead back to the same source. So however you want to slice the pie, the 3.14159265358 however you want to slice that thing up, it's irrational. There's multiple ways. There's
Yep,
infinite ways.
there
Go
is.
for it.
Yeah. Hmm.
Go for it. Just do what you do you. And here's the thing. When you do you, I respect you for doing you. And
Hmm.
that's the collaboration. That's the individuation, being the individual of freedom and then being of the love, because you know, as I'm doing me as an individual, I'm still
Yep.
accepting those around me regardless of the color of your skin or the nationality or the religion or the belief system. I
Hmm.
respect you because you're a child of God, and that's enough
Right.
for me.
That's right. Very good. All right. Well, as we wrap things up here, Nini, for anybody watching this, how would you, if somebody wanted to contact you or talk to you more about anything that we discussed, how would you prefer they reach out to you, or what's your preferred method of communication?
We can do email, connect to me on Facebook. I'm super easy to reach.
Hmm.
Um, email, it's like I want to say phone number, but I've been spammed a few times, so I'm a little
Yeah.
cautious who I give my number out to. But Facebook or Facebook Messenger is definitely there. You know, you'll find I'm wearing a pink dress, holding a thing of flowers. I'm very easy to see on Facebook. Send me
Hmm.
a message in Messenger. I'll get back. You know, I'll get back to you. I know sometimes friend requests are funny, but if you send me a message in Messenger and let me know from where you're reaching out, I usually do check my all the boxes in case people do reach out. And it's basically if you want to get in contact with me on the spirit on the psychic, I want to get in contact with you too. So I will look for you, and
Hmm.
my subconscious mind, you know, if I don't feel it on the conscious, I will be notified in some way, shape or form. So it's like if you want to find me, you know, I'm open. So that would probably be the best way.
Excellent.